Hello and welcome to another episode of the Meeples Miniatures Miniature Review Show. In today's show we're going to be looking at another set of plastic figures from Wargames Factory, and these are their Numidian light infantry, which are part of their Might of Rome range. So here we see the packaging, first of all, for this. Yet again, fairly minimal packaging. The whole thing comes in a plastic bag, and again, very cleverly packaged. As we saw last week with the Zulus, if you look on these sprues, they're all moulded so the whole thing just hangs together in the packet. Everything mutually supports itself, nothing should break off and get broken. Very cleverly done. So we have a look at the sprues themselves. We see there are two different types of sprues. There is a weapon sprue complete with heads, a couple of arms, and then there is a body sprue. This sprue contains all the arms and 4 different bodies. 28 figures in total, and as you can see, multi-pose, so lots of possibilities available. So let's take a closer look at the body sprue. As you can see, there are 4 bodies on this particular sprue. Again, they've taken the approach of having separate arms and separate heads, and you can see on this sprue there are 12 different sets of arms available. Let's take a closer look at the bodies. All 4 are in tunics. See, a couple have bare feet, a couple are in sandals. As we look closely at these, you see again there are a couple of issues with mould lines and some issues with the sharpness of the detail, especially separating the legs from the tunic, and especially as it dips in underneath. Also, some of the definition on the legs isn't fantastic, so some of the legs look a little bit thick and muscly around the calves. As you look at the other bodies, again, the feet don't look absolutely fantastic as far as moulding is concerned. There's a bit of a lack of definition, again, in the separation between the legs and the tunic. So the actual definition of the sculpting could be better. Yeah, it's not particularly sharp. Okay, so let's go back and we'll look at some of the weapon options available. Here you see we have some spears, some swords, also some swords in scabbards. Further along, there's the option of having a musician with a horn. There's a commander's helmet, a couple of helmet plumes, options to have archers. Again, as you look further, you see there are several different possibilities as far as heads are concerned. Helmeted heads, 2 different types of head without helmets. You have shields, quivers, an option for standard bearer. So there's lots of things available, plenty of variety there. Again, if you look back at the main sprue, there are an awful lot of options available, and there are several of these sprues. As before, I point out that one possible issue is with the shields. If you look at the back of the shields here, you see they are completely blank. So there is no particular area that you can use to mould these into a hand or onto an arm. So, got a slight issue with that. I think it can make it slightly awkward when it comes to actually gluing the models together, as we'll come on to shortly. And again, as you look at these arm sprues, you'll see an awful lot of the arms are taken so that the hands are open. The majority are. So, obviously, those open hands are ready for the swords or the spears. So, again, there's a lot of options available for these guys. You probably have 8 or 10 archers. Lots of sword arm troops, potentially lots of spear arm troops. You know, there's a full range of stuff available. And of course, with the change in the headgear, or the lack of it, you know, these don't just have to be Numidians. You could quite easily make these up as Greek paltasts, for example. So very much kind of generic light infantry. I think even if you look in the weapons, there's potentially a couple of slings in there as well. So there's definitely a scope for having them not just as Numidians. Here again, I've made a couple up. I did this very quickly, and my comments, well, similar in some ways to the Zulus I looked at last week. A few issues with mould lines, although not as many as with the Zulus. There are some issues with the heads. Again, the way they're put onto the sprue, it does mean that the mould line from the sprue goes right through the neck where the join is into the body. It does make it very awkward to fit those in properly without doing quite a bit of clean-up work. I found on mine, again, I suppose I was a bit rushed, but they didn't quite sit right. It took a lot of work to get them in. A lot of clean-up work is required. I just clipped these off the sprue to put them on, and as you can see, there's an awful lot of sprue bits on the sword, the helmet, on the arm. You have to be very careful, take your time, do a lot of cleaning up with these. Again, gluing the arms onto the main body. The actual contact area for the arms to the body is very small, so the main problem with that actually is just because it makes the actual join quite fragile. I found this out as when I was taking these out to photograph them. I happened to drop them, and they hit the floor and just broke apart. You can imagine doing that, knocking a figure off a Wargames table, which does tend to happen from time to time. With that sort of result, I can immediately see that's going to be somewhat frustrating. Having said that, these are easier to pose than the Zulus. Things like putting the swords in the open hands, what have you, works very well. Had a few problems with the shield. It looks okay, but I wasn't amazingly happy with it. Other things of note, yeah, the archer looks alright. Would have been nice if I could try and get a better match as far as an arrow loosing arm is concerned. I was struggling to find one where you could just see that an archer had just released an arrow. And again, all the bows seem to be styled in such a way that they're supposed to be that the archer has just released an arrow. So a little bit of an issue there. Looking at the base of the figures, you can see here there's a bit of an issue, especially on the guy on the right, with the definition with the feet on the base. The feet do tend to flow into the base a little bit. And so, whilst I suggest that these are a better set of figures than the Zulus, they still suffer from some of the problems. The facial definition, I think, is better. They're easier as far as the multi-pose aspect is concerned, although I still found the heads incredibly fiddly. I have to put my hand up and say I don't put plastic figures together that often, so I suppose if you're used to putting plastic figures together, these actually may be a much better option for you. They may actually be a lot easier than what I'm making out here. It's nice to see a plastic set of ancient light infantry. I can certainly see that these will have their uses in not just Carthaginian armies, but as light troops in Roman armies and maybe even Greek armies. Price point, very similar to what we saw with the Zulus. They're $19.99, around about £14.50. This for 28 figures. So works out about 50p a figure. Now, there's a lot of modelling options here. You can do an awful lot with them. So that's pretty good value for money. As I say, from a detailing point of view, they're better than the Zulus that I had a look at last time. But to my mind, they still suffer some problems. So I think it will take you some time going through, looking at all the modelling options, finding out your best poses, and doing a lot of cleanup. But there is a potential there. But looking at some of the painted examples on Wargames Factory's website, these do have the potential to come out looking pretty nice. So a better set of plastic figures than the Zulus. I still think these are some way to go. I mean, obviously they've been working on stuff since, with the releases of the Germans and the sci-fi troops and various other bits and pieces. And as I said before, I like Wargames Factory as a company. I think their business model is inspired. The fact that they're actually asking gamers, what do you want us to make? What do you want us to do? And the fact that they ended up coming out with these sci-fi shock troopers, for example, which everybody was waiting for and desperate for, and they eventually came out with them. And that was simply because people asked for them. So I love their business model. So hats off to them for that. And certainly comparing these to the Zulus, you can see that they're making progress. I'd like to see some of their latest stuff to see what we're up to scratch with now. But I can't say these are much better than average. They give you a nice result, but I think you'll need to put an awful lot of work in to clean them up, put them together well to get a decent result out of. So, that's it for another miniatures review. Hope you've enjoyed the show. Take care and come back soon. Bye.